Thank you. The time, 8:10. A group of more than 100 British Muslims has written to the Independent newspaper today to condemn the kidnapping of Alan Henning, the hostage threatened with death at the hands of Islamist fanatics in Syria. In Islam, they write, concern for fellow humans is a religious obligation. The signatories represent Muslims right around the country. They include the Secretary-General of the Muslim Council of Britain. And it's a message that many people will regard as right and proper and welcome, but not all. Some have been using the news from Syria and news from closer to home as well to try to find new ways of driving a wedge between non-Muslims and Muslim Britons. Last weekend, more than 1,000 far-right demonstrators took to the streets of Rotherham. They were protesting after it became known that police had ignored reports that children in the town had been sexually abused by gangs of men, many of those men of Pakistani origin. Now, a senior Home Office advisor has told this programme that this sex abuse scandal, plus the murder of Western hostages by Islamic State, is fuelling a right-wing backlash. The man doesn't want to be identified, but he works with the government on its Prevent strategy, which focuses on helping those who are vulnerable to recruitment by violent extremists. Let's hear from Seema Katecha.
As somebody who's been involved in these far-right organisations for over 20 years, I would put money on the fact that they're actually now be looking to make a stand, and, a big stand as well.
A former member of a neo-Nazi group. He joined as a teenager. He says what he was taught was incredibly disturbing.
There's books that are available on the internet that you're encouraged to read.
And what are these books about?
How to disable somebody, how to basically kill people.
He became increasingly angry with ethnic minorities on benefits. He doesn't want to be named.
Money was being allocated to other areas, whereas I kept looking at the British population and thought, well, why are we being ignored?
Now he says he's changed his views and is no longer a racist. But he's concerned about the power of the far right and is convinced the beheadings by Islamic State and the Rotherham sex abuse scandal has stoked more anger.
So with what's going on now, it's ideal recruitment ground, and then it's obviously ideal for them to sort of instill action into the young members.
Show our opposition to Muslim grooming gangs. We say enough is enough.
Far-right protesters marching in Leeds earlier this month, some holding banners saying white youth against the grooming gangs.
There is not enough protest.
On Saturday, the same kind of protest took place in Rotherham. The police said officers faced serious violence. One of the Home Office's most senior advisors on right-wing extremism says the government underestimates the movement and is more focused on Islamic extremism. He helps racists reform their character and doesn't want to be named over fears he could be attacked. I met him in a car parked alongside a canal. He says there are at least 5 new far-right groups compared with last year. Some even include university students who idolise Hitler.
I've been working with people from the far right for about 27 years now. I can see increase in some of these groups and membership of some of these groups based on the things that are happening nationally here and internationally. I had one person who said that he would like to implement death camps in the UK. And when I asked who he'd like to put in the death camps, he just listed everyone that he didn't see as white British. So that was every Asian person, every black person.
Somebody like me, for example?
Definitely, yeah.
Do you think, because the government says that through its channel programme, it is looking into the far right?
A lot of the emphasis is put onto the global jihadist sort of agenda, as I said, which is fine, and it needs to be. But I really feel that this agenda, the repercussions of some of that in terms of the far right can't be ignored. I wouldn't want to get to the point where something happens and then we look back and think, well, actually, we should have addressed that as well.
An organisation called Tell Mama monitors anti-Islamic hatred. It says in August, when the first IS beheading happened and the report into Rotherham child sex abuse was published, it recorded more than 200 abusive incidents targeted at Muslims in England. That's double what it recorded in January. Even though its data is collected anecdotally, the Muslim Council of Britain says it supports the claim that there has been an escalation in violence against UK Asians in general.
My name's Fayaz Mughal, Director of Tell Mama. The concern here is, and this is really important, that within the far-right circles, the real impact is possibly through cells or lone wolves who are, for example, collecting material that they can use to throw against mosques, incendiary materials, and it's the lone wolf individuals who actually absorb a lot of this narrative who can potentially do things.
It's not just the average swear word or the racist comment on the street now. It's getting violent.
A think tank which specialises in research on the far right has launched a video campaign on how to combat racism.
We are at a stage in European history in which we need to take a clear stand against this right-wing extremist.
The Institute for Strategic Dialogue is calling on the government to change its approach and has published some research today which supports the idea it's a serious problem. It says the UK must find new ways to engage with right-wing groups and help those who want a way out. Vidhya Ramalingam led the research.
When individuals are entrenched in those movements, there is very little support or option for them to leave. And we've seen that there's evidence from programs that exist in Sweden, in Germany, and in Scandinavia that actually, if you offer a space for individuals to turn to when they are doubting their ideology, we can prevent violence from actually happening in the first place.
The Home Office insists much of its work on radicalisation specifically addresses the far right. It says it does not underestimate the threat it poses. But critics argue the government is scared to talk openly about an anti-Muslim backlash in case it encourages more racism. By not doing that, they say it leaves open the real threat of growing disorder from the militant right.
Seema Katecha reporting. Well, I suppose there's no great surprise that the far right might be reawakened by recent events. The question, what to do and who should be taking the lead? Is it the government? Is it the wider community? Do Muslims themselves need to do more to make their peacefulness clear to all, or is that an unfair targeting of them? Hazel Blears, MP, member of the Intelligence and Security Committee, former Home Office counter-terrorism Minister and Communities Minister as well, is on the line from Salford. And Akila Ahmed is one of the signatories to that letter we were talking about, mentioning in The Independent today about the kidnapping of Alan Henning. She sits on a government working group on anti-Muslim hatred. Good morning to you both.
Good morning.
Akila Ahmed, first of all, is it happening? I mean, these things are often quite anecdotal, aren't they, and difficult to be clear about. But from where you stand, can you see that there is a backlash that is having a real impact on Muslims in Britain?
Absolutely. I think in recent months we have seen, and definitely in the last year or so, we have seen an increase in anti-Muslim hatred playing out in different types of attacks against the Muslim community, whether it's women having their hijab being pulled off or mosques being vandalised, or just people walking down the road going about their business and somebody sort of shouting at them and swearing at them, swearing abuse at them. So we have definitely seen an increase in anti-Muslim hatred.
You're one of the people who've written this letter to The Independent about Alan Henning. Is part of that, part of the reason you have felt to be a part of that, a combating, if you like, of the excuses that people might have for attacking Muslims?
I think the first reason I signed it was because I wanted to show very, very clearly my disgust at the actions of IS and how abhorrent their actions are. And then, yes, it does. I wanted to make sure and make very clear to the wider community that Muslims in no shape or form have any kind of sympathy with the actions of IS, and what they're doing is absolutely wrong and it's not within our faith, and there isn't any kind of harbouring of any kind of sympathy or thinking that maybe what they've done is right.
Hazel Blears, do you welcome that letter?
Absolutely. And I think that all the moderate Muslim people that I've met are absolutely horrified at what's being done, supposedly in their name. But I don't think that these phenomena that the piece has been about today, whether it's the right wing, the extremism in the Islamist line, or indeed attacks against Jewish people as a result of some of the stuff that's gone on in Gaza. There's been, I think, a doubling of anti-Semitic incidents. I think all of this is about the far right wanting to make other people different. If the history of the Nazi movement was you made Jewish people almost inhuman, and therefore it was legitimate to attack them. That's what the right will do with the Muslim community. They've done it for the Jewish community for years and years. And if you look at the way in which organisations like EDL actually drive extremism in the Muslim community, Al Muhajirun, EDL, they've all got active here. I think that what really needs to be done is what we've tried to do for a long time, certainly I have, and that's to bring people together. If you bring people together, it's a lot more difficult to hate each other if you're sharing day-to-day lives. And I honestly do not think that the government is doing enough in the whole Prevent programme to bring people together and to support the Muslim majority who are absolutely, as I say, horrified at what's being done.
Give us one practical thing or set of things that isn't being done that should be.
Well, for example, when I was responsible for the Prevent programme, we had a whole series of practical projects working with young Muslims about what life in Britain could be like, encouraging people to get involved in civic life, getting more school governors, getting more magistrates from the Muslim community, absolutely about living in Britain, living in a democracy with the rule of law and freedom is a brilliant place to be, that you can be a really devout, strong Muslim, as well as being a really good member of the British community. And it's that kind of practical role models, making sure that women's voices are heard. They're very often not heard in the Muslim community. All of that practical work, it's long term, it's generational, but it's absolutely essential.
Do you accept, Akhil Ahmed, that is a responsibility, at least in part, of the Muslim community? We were hearing from Keith Ellison in the programme, America's first Muslim congressman. He was saying that one of the things that needs to be done is you need to say very clearly, you can't have one kind of life in the mosques where you say one thing and think one thing, and another life in the civic sphere, that Muslims have the world that we all live in America in his case and in Britain here. Is it fair to say that has not happened enough in the past?
I think the Muslim community does have a role to play in combating, this type of extremism and radicalisation. But I think what is not spoken about is that a lot of mosques and a lot of people are doing that already, but we don't hear about it so much. I think also the sole responsibility for tackling radicalisation cannot be placed on the Muslim community alone. The Muslim community is a very young community. I think something like 50% of the Muslim community are under the age of 28. So they need support in dealing with these difficult issues and making sure that, hate preachers don't have a platform.
But that's Hazel Blair's point, isn't it? Actually, they're not getting that support. It's not being targeted where it needs to be. Help for women and particularly help for young people.
I think the sort of support that the community needs is to basically elevate what they're already doing. The type of support I think that Hazel is talking about is needed, but I think it has to be a bottom-up approach. It can't be a top-down approach. And I think that's one of the issues with the previous Prevent programme, Hazel, was that it was very sort of top-down in its approach. And also you mentioned some of the work that was done with young Muslims. I think a lot of that work was done with communities in a silo. So either work was done with young Muslims or it was done with other faith groups. It wasn't done, in a way which integrated the different types of people, and they had shared sort of background, shared sort of engagement around issues like civic duty and what it means to be proud of being British.
Akhil Ahmed and Hazel Blair as well. Thank you both very much.
Thank you.